from CNN, Israel and Hezbollah step back from the brink of wider war for now.
For nearly a month, people in Lebanon and Israel braced for a wider war. A deadly rocket strike from Lebanon last month on the town of Majdal Shams in the Israel-occupied Golan Heights was followed by an Israeli retaliatory strike that killed Hezbollah's top commander, Fuad Shukr, in southern Beirut. The powerful Iran-backed group vowed to respond. The threat triggered a slew of flight cancellations on both sides of the border, a chorus of governments imploring their citizens to leave Lebanon and Israel, and a breathless diplomatic effort to avert an escalation that Western government feared would spark a regional conflict. On Sunday morning, Hezbollah said it had delivered its anticipated response by launching hundreds of drones, Katyusha rockets, Soviet-era short-range projectiles. The swarm of airborne weapons, it said, sought to overwhelm Israel's Bont air defense system and pave a path for its targets. 11 Israeli military sites in northern Israel and the occupied Golan Heights. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said all of Hezbollah's drones were intercepted. Israeli officials said the military preemptively struck Hezbollah targets in the early hours of Sunday to prevent a much wider attack, adding that it hit many rocket launchers in Lebanon. Hezbollah dismissed this. What happened was aggression, not preemptive action, Hezbollah chief Hassan Nasrallah said in a speech on Sunday night, referring to the Israeli strikes that began around half an hour before Hezbollah's attack. 3 Lebanese fighters were killed in those Israeli attacks, Hezbollah said. The cross-border fire on Sunday morning marked a significant escalation after nearly 11 months of hostilities between Hezbollah and Israel, but appears to have dampened fears of a wider war for now. In Israel, authorities soon lifted security restrictions in the country's northernmost territory, known as the Upper Galilee. In Lebanon, Hezbollah said it had concluded attacks on Israel for the day. Nasrallah declared the group's retaliation for Shukr's killing meticulously completed. With both sides declaring victory, the region appears to once again have walked back from the brink of all-out war. But while Hezbollah's promised response appears to be largely out of the way, Israel must continue to wait for another threat to transpire. Iran's vowed revenge for the killing of Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran, which it blamed on Israel. The low-intensity conflict at the Lebanon-Israel border is set to resume. Netanyahu said on Sunday that what happened today is not the end. Nasrallah, meanwhile, struck a similar tone, reinforcing a widely held view that the fighting on the border is a war of attrition where each side aims to wear down the other. After the attacks in Beirut and Tehran at the end of last month, Western and Israeli intelligence officials, diplomats, and analysts scrambled to figure out what the retaliations promised by Iran and its most powerful non-state partner might look like. It sparked shuttle diplomacy with the United States, the United Kingdom, and France, urging Hezbollah and Iran to exercise restraint. This appeared to expedite another round of talks over a ceasefire and hostage release deal in Gaza, in a bid to ward off another escalation by the Iran-led Axis, which has repeatedly conditioned stopping its attacks on Israel and its allies on the end to the Israeli offense in Gaza. It seems pretty straightforward to me. Stop a genocide, we'll stop attacking you. I mean, right?
That's reasonable.
Yeah, I feel like it is. That's not a crazy request by any means.
No, it's pretty much too late, but
yeah.
Too little too late.
I think that when I hear Kamala sing, "Now it's time for a ceasefire deal," what, now that they're all dead, you can be like, "Oh, we did it, guys." Just shut the fuck up. You're not gonna do shit, you stupid bitch.
She's speaking.
Huh?
She's speaking.
Oh, yeah, she's speaking. Dude, disrespectful thing I think I've ever seen to voters in a long time. And I've watched Trump lie to people. But to do that, like, that was just...
Republicans stab you from the front. Democrats stab you in the back.
Sad, true. I am speaking. No, you're supposed to earn our vote.
Hey, if you think she can win Michigan with 100,000 less votes, more power to her, I guess.
She definitely doesn't have my vote. I don't think I'm ever going to vote red or blue again. They're just the same shit from a different cup. Like, I think that one kid pointed out pretty good. The lesser of two evils is still picking an evil. The talks to end the war continue to move at a glacial pace, despite intense diplomatic efforts by mediators, including the US, Egypt, and Qatar. High-level talks in Cairo ended on Sunday, giving way to the resumption of lower-level technical negotiations. But even as the US expresses optimism, with one official describing the weekend's talks as constructive, there are no signs of progress on the major sticking points. By constructive, do they mean the construction of their beachside condos? They agreed on which ones they all get? Because that's the only thing that US is going to talk about. That's all US cares about. You know you done fucked up again when Africa says that you're...
South Africa's calling you out, yeah.
Yeah. You know, you just done fucked up, bro. Sorry, this is frustrating. This is why I don't like doing this. This raises the stakes for a potential showdown between Iran and Israel. But Tehran may be inclined to pay lip service to the talks. While it has vowed to respond to Israel, the Islamic Republic has repeatedly said that it wants to avoid action that could adversely impact the negotiations. And the latest escalation has shown that neither Iran nor its allied non-state fighting groups in the region can stomach the prospect of a wider war. Hezbollah had repeatedly vowed to retaliate to any Israeli strike in Beirut with an attack on major urban centers in Israel. Yet whether by design or due to Israel's claimed preemptive strikes, it fell short of that threat. Most of the areas it targeted on Sunday were within the border area that has been the site of the hostilities since October, and the short-range Soviet-era rockets it used have been a mainstay of Hezbollah's attacks on Israeli forces for decades. The risk of an all-out conflict appears to be significantly lower in the aftermath of Sunday's crossfire, yet Iran's open-ended threat will continue to contribute to the war of nerves that has defined much of the low-grade conflict between the Tehran-led Axis and Israel. The region will remain on a knife's edge for as long as the war in Gaza goes on, at the mercy of the next miscalculation, no matter how low the warring parties' appetite for conflict might be. So what happens once he completes the genocide? He's just going to hope that Iran...
They take the land. That's what they've always wanted to do.
Oh, no, I know that part. I mean, as far as war goes, you think Iran will...
I think Israel has to be in a war state for Netanyahu to stay in power.
I don't think he's going to be short of enemies. But of course, he's going to rely on Daddy United States to take him out. And Mommy Kamala Harris is going to suck that dick and do exactly what he fucking wants. So fuck that cunt.
Well, if Netanyahu completes the genocide of Palestinians, it will be World War III. Iran, Yemen, Saudi Arabia, it doesn't matter. They're all gonna... It's not. It's because at this point, it's that Israelis hate Arabs, not just Palestinians. It's just they spit on Arabs at every turn. And they know they have no respect for them. Like we're about to read what they do to the Temple Mount.
You know, you would think that we could point out racism, you know, considering that we're a nation that hailed from racism, that we would easily be able to be like, that's racist. Hey, what you're doing, bro? It's racist.
I don't think Semites should be anti-Semitic. To me, I don't, you know what I mean? Like,
it's literally playing the victim. It's literally using what happened before you were even alive as justification for what you're doing now. Hate is too much effort.
Is the Israelis, they poll the people, and time after time, they feel like the IDF's not doing enough, or, you know, they rioted so that the IDF soldiers that were imprisoned could be set free. They definitely hate Arabs, and they definitely hate Palestinians.
This is from Haaretz. I'd raise an Israeli flag and build a synagogue. Ben-Gvir charts explosive vision for Temple Mount Al-Aqsa compound.
In an interview on Army Radio, National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, who frequently visits the site and calls for the violation of the status quo, said, "With all due respect, I was elected for this very reason, to ensure there's no discriminatory policy on the Temple Mount." Israel's National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir claimed on Monday that there is a new policy that doesn't limit Jewish prayer at the Al-Aqsa Mosque, Temple Mount compound. The far-right minister said there won't be a discriminatory policy at the Temple Mount. You're allowed to pray, he added. If I was able to do anything I wanted to do at the Temple Mount, the flag of Israel would have been raised there long ago. Asked if he would establish a synagogue at the Temple Mount if he could, Ben-Gvir replied in the affirmative. In response, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu office clarified that there was no change in the status quo. There is a directive that there should be an equal law between Jews and Muslims, Ben-Gvir said in the interview. With all due respect, I was elected for this very reason, to ensure there is no discriminatory policy on the Temple Mount and there is no capitulation to Hamas on the Temple Mount. The guy likes to say the same thing over and over again. The status quo on the Temple Mount was set by the then Defense Minister Moshe Dayan shortly after the Six-Day War of 1967. Ever since, the Muslims have run the compound, and its status as a place of worship sacred to Muslims has been preserved. The cabinet's decision at the time was that any Jew seeking to pray on the Temple Mount would be directed by police to go to the Western Wall instead. Defense Minister Yoav Gallant said in response that undermining the status quo of the Temple Mount is an unnecessary and irresponsible act. Ben-Gvir's actions endanger Israel. Interior Minister Moshe Arbel from the Shash Party called on Netanyahu to put Ben-Gvir in his place, while National Unity head Benny Gantz wrote on X that Ben-Gvir's irresponsible statements put to the test Israel's strategic alliances with Muslim countries who make up a coalition fighting the Iranian axis of evil. His lack of wisdom could cost lives. Earlier this month, Ben-Gvir and fellow minister Yitzhak Wasserlov of his far-right Otzma Yedid party visited the compound together with dozens of Jewish worshippers. During the visit, hundreds of Jews also prayed in the compound, violating the status quo, with some bowing in prayer, waving flags, and singing the Israeli national anthem. The police looked on and did not enforce the law. We've made significant progress in Israel's sovereignty here. Our policy is to permit Jewish prayer, Ben-Gvir said at the site. So yeah, they shit on. They aren't out just to shit on Palestinians. There's a lot of right-wing people in Netanyahu's coalition that are just straight up anti-Semitic. They're just straight up racist, and they Jewish superiority is what they're.
Almost sounds like Nazi superiority.
It sounds a lot like Nazis, yeah.
I think that's why they think they can do it, because they can be like, look what happened to us. We're not doing that. And
Yeah.
like literally you're doing that and then some, because you've done it so much quicker. Like, I don't know if it's worse.
It's like they attack and then they have a victim mentality.
Yeah. Were you listening to that thing that I was watching that was talking about why they introduced, was it cocaine or meth?
Watermelon?
No, not that. But the reason that they like introduced it in general was to stop Fidel Castro's ideologies from spreading down. Fidel Castro. So basically, they created like a drug pen right here to stop Fidel Castro from spreading his ideology
Communism.
further down, because they would get like into like these gang territories and stuff like that, and they wouldn't be able to like spread it further, and there'd be like battles, and some other people would get hooked on drugs and shit. Were you watching that thing with me? It was talking about why they. I think it was the 25.
Okay, yeah,
25
CIA.
guy. Yeah, CIA. Thank you.
Okay.
It was our government. Yeah, it's our government that did it.
CIA will do anything to stop communism.
Like literally.
You want to stop communism? Start giving people more. More freedom, more money.
That's a communist idea.
More,
Sir.
yeah. If you want to beat them, you join them. Because if you don't join them, we're coming for your ass. That's why. That's why you do that. So people never think about, hey, what about communism? That's how you stop communism.
Let's just point to the French Revolution as, just a clear way to get to thinking. They still threw their lavish parties while their people starved, and
We got to
I
use
know what
our
happened.
heads so they can lose theirs.
This is from the Associated Press. Israel's economy is struggling. Economists say ending the war would help.
In Jerusalem's Old City, nearly all souvenir shops are closed. In Haifa's flea market, forlorn merchants polish their wares on empty streets. Airlines are canceling flights. Businesses are failing, and luxury hotels are half empty. Nearly 11 months into the war with Hamas, Israel's economy is struggling as the country leaders grind ahead with an offensive in Gaza that shows no sign of ending and threatens to escalate into a wider conflict.
At least they're getting something negative out of it, I guess. At least there's some kind of negative consequence.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has tried to allay concerns by saying the economic damage is only temporary, but the bloodiest, most destructive war ever between Israel and Hamas has hurt thousands of small businesses and compromised international trust in an economy once thought of as an entrepreneurial dynamo. Some leading economists say a ceasefire is the best way to stop the damage. The economy right now is under huge uncertainty, and it's related to the security situation. How long the war will go on, what the intensity will be, and the question of whether there will be further escalation. Israel's former central bank chief, who is now the vice president of research at the Israel Democracy Institute, a Jerusalem think tank. The war has inflicted a far heavier toll on Gaza's already broken economy, displacing 90% of the population and leaving the vast majority of the workforce unemployed. All banks in the territory have shut. The fighting has killed more than 40,000 people, according to the Palestinian health officials. The fighting in Gaza and daily attacks from Hezbollah militants in Lebanon has also driven tens of thousands of people from their homes along Israel's northern and southern borders and caused large-scale damage. The Israeli economy has recovered from previous shocks, including shorter wars with Hamas, but this longer conflict has created a bigger strain, including the costs of rebuilding, compensating families of victims and reserve soldiers, and vast military spending. The drawn-out nature of the fighting and the threat of further escalation with Iran and its Lebanese proxy, Hezbollah, have especially harsh impact on tourism. Though tourism is not a major driver of the economy, the damage has hurt thousands of workers and small businesses. The hardest thing is that we don't know when the war will end, said Israeli tour guide Daniel Jacob, whose family is living off savings. We need to finish the war before this year's end. If it's another half a year, I don't know how long we're going to make it. Jacob, 45, returned in April from 6 months of duty as a reserve soldier to find out that his business has dried up. He was forced to shutter the tourism company he spent 2 decades developing. His only income is aid from the government, which pays him half his pre-war salary every few months. Meir Sabag, a Haifa antiques dealer whose shop sat empty, said business is worse now than during the COVID-19 pandemic. On a recent weekday, the formerly bustling port of Haifa, a major hub of Israeli import-export where massive container ships would often stop, was still. With Yemen's Houthi rebel group endangering ships passing through Egypt's Suez Canal, many long-haul ships have stopped using Israeli ports as hubs, said a port official who spoke on the condition of anonymity because he was sharing internal information. He said Israeli ports saw a 60% drop in shipping in the first half of the year compared with the same period in 2023. Renewed U.S.-led ceasefire efforts appear to be sputtering, and Iran and Hezbollah have threatened to avenge the recent assassinations of top militant leaders. They just did, raising the threat of a wider regional war. These fears have prompted major airlines, including Delta, United, and Lufthansa.
Lufthansa. That must not be American.
To suspend flights in and out of Israel.
Good.
Jesus. Yaakov Shinin, an Israeli economist with decades of experience advising Israeli premiers and government ministries, said the total cost of the war could amount to $120 billion, or 20% of the country's gross domestic product, a broad measure of economic activity. Of all 38 member countries in the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, Israel's economy underwent the biggest slowdown from April to June. The organization reported Thursday the Israeli GDP was projected to grow 3% in 2024. The Bank of Israel now projects the growth rate at 1.3%, and that's if the war ends this year. Fitch downgraded Israel's rating from A+ to A earlier this month, following similar downgrades by S&P and Moody's. The downgrading could raise the government's borrowing costs. In our view, the conflict in Gaza could last well into 2025, Fitch warned in its rating note, which cited the possibility of significant additional military spending, destruction of infrastructure, and more sustained damage to economic activity and investment. In another worrying sign, the finance minister this month said the country's deficit over the last 12 months has risen over 8% of GDP, far exceeding the 6.6 deficit to GDP ratio the ministry projected for 2024. In 2023, Israel's budget deficit was roughly 4% of its GDP. So they're feeling it. The downgrade and the deficit have increased pressure on the Israeli government and the war and reduced the deficit, something that would require unpopular decisions such as raising taxes or cutting spending. But Netanyahu needs to keep his coalition afloat, and his hardline finance minister, Bezalel Smotrich, wants the war to continue until Hamas is decimated. Flug, the former central bank chief, said the situation is unsustainable, and the coalition will have to cut back on spending, such as unpopular subsidies to ultra-Orthodox schools that have been perceived by the broader public as wasteful. The public will have a hard time accepting it if the government does not show that the severity of the situation forces them to give up on things that they are dear to them. Smotrich said Israel's economy is strong and vowed to pass a responsible budget that will continue to support all the needs of the war while maintaining fiscal frameworks and promoting growth engines. The unemployment rate has dipped below pre-war levels. Meanwhile, many small businesses have closed because their owners and employees have called up for reserve military duty. Others are struggling amid the broader slowdown. Israeli business information company Coface BDI reports that some 46,000 businesses have closed since the start of the war, 75% of them small businesses. Even Jerusalem's iconic American Colony Hotel, a popular stop for politicians, diplomats, and movie stars, has laid off workers and is muling pay cuts, saying, "We did consider at one point closing for a few months, but of course that would mean sacking all the staff. It would have meant letting the gardens, which were developed over 120 years, to go fallow." Shinin said the best way to help the economy bounce back would be to end the war, but he cautioned, "If we're stubborn and it continues, this war, we will not recover."
This is just one fucked up story after one fucked up story, and it's all about the same fucking place.
Yep.
It's-
Sucks.
Yeah.
This is from the BBC. Diseases spread in Gaza as sewage contaminates camps and coast.
The waters on parts of Gaza's Mediterranean coastline have started turning brown as health experts warn of the spread of open sewage and diseases across the territory. Satellite images analyzed by BBC Arabic show what appears to be large discharge of sewage spill off the coast of Deir Abla. A local official told BBC Arabic displaced people in nearby camps are sending their sewage straight to sea. It is because of the increase in the number of displaced people, and many are connecting. There's a fly buzzing around my mic. It is because of the increase in the number of displaced people, and many are connecting their own pipes to the rainwater drainage system, said Abu Ismail Sarsour, head of the Deir al-Balah Emergency Committee. An environmental expert from the Pax for Peace organization confirmed that wastewater appeared to be heading into the sea from nearby crowded camps after examining the satellite pictures. The sewage discharge in the images captured on August the 2nd covered an area over 2 square kilometers or 0.8 square miles. Satellite images show the discharge first started appearing in June and that it grew steadily over the next 2 months. People do continue to use the bathroom even when they're being blown up. You guys realize that, right? Satellite images show the discharge first started appearing in June and that it grew steadily over the next 2 months. It's not clear if the coastal population is still growing as more recent satellite images are not available. Intensive Israeli bombardment has led to the collapse of Gaza's wastewater management infrastructure, a UN environmental report concluded in June. Really, it took us to fucking June? Oh my God! The Israeli Defense Ministry body overseeing policy for the Palestinian territories, COGAT, told BBC Arabic a dedicated humanitarian task force has taken action to improve the sewage system in Gaza. In recent months, COGAT coordinated the restoration of water wells and desalination facilities, as well as the extension of water pipes in Gaza, according to its statement. The BBC is not able to independently verify specific improvements to Gaza's sewage infrastructure. Israel, alongside Egypt, does not allow independent journalists into Gaza except on controlled and brief visits with the Israeli military. Health experts, though, are sounding the alarm about the spread of waterborne diseases after a 10-month-old baby was partially paralyzed after contracting polio, the first registered case in Gaza for 25 years. UN and World Health Organization, WHO, officials also called for 2 one-week ceasefires so they can vaccinate the 600+ thousand children in Gaza. But observers say the delivery of vaccines would probably hit the same barriers affecting the flow of other humanitarian aid, making distribution slow and extremely difficult. The destruction of Gaza's healthcare system will also make any vaccination program an enormous challenge.
Wow, I wonder who destroyed it.
I mean, I don't see they'll let in the bottles of the polio vaccine, but they're not gonna let in the needles. So they're just gonna be like, swallow it, guys. Just swallow it, figure it out. We'll see what happens when you do that.
Yeah, the Israelis would be like, well, we have to put a fire extinguisher up your ass and let it out before we give you the vaccine. Yeah, with the medicine in it. We need to put a fire extinguisher up your ass and put the medicine in you.
Yeah. You know, I hope those people know that there's a very, very special place for people like them. Because I may not believe heaven, hell, God, afterlife kind of stuff, but I do believe in karma, and I do believe that you will get what you give in some way at some point in time. And in response to BBC Arabic, COGAT insisted there were no restrictions on medical aid.
We know that's a lie.
In a later social media statement, Koget said an additional 60,000 polio vaccines will be delivered to vaccinate over 1 million children in the coming weeks.
They can't distribute it for the same reasons that they can't get the humanitarian food in there or anything else in there, is because the Israelis don't let it through.
The charity Oxfam told BBC Arabic a quarter of Gaza's population had already become ill because of waterborne diseases. We're seeing a catastrophic health crisis unfolding in front of our eyes, said Lama Abdul Samad, a water and sanitation expert in Oxfam. Polio is a waterborne disease, and it is directly linked to the sanitation situation. The sanitation infrastructure has been damaged severely to a point that it's flooding the streets and the neighborhoods, and people are basically living adjacent to puddles of sewage, she added. New photos and satellite images analyzed by BBC Arabic illustrate how the problem of untreated sewage in Gaza has been getting steadily worse. Oh, I guess he's not doing too well in redoing the infrastructure if it's steadily getting worse. Maybe he's lying. The Sheikh Radwan Lagoon in northern Gaza, which was once a source of clean rainwater, appears to be overflowing with dirty water. The lagoon has clearly been contaminated by raw sewage, Ms. Abdul Samad said after assessing the pictures. Several Palestinians living nearby have complained to BBC Arabic's Gaza Lifeline emergency radio service of the overflowing wastewater, stench, and rodents coming out of the lagoon. Ooh.
Now it's like a real American lagoon.
Concern is the rodents part, because the rodents are what's thought to have carried like the Black Plague and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Which also came as a
Disease,
sanitation issue. So it's just like you can't win. You can't win. If you were born in an area that you had no choice but to be born in, into a ward you never even had a part of, had a voice in, had a vote on. Raw sewage is running into our property because of the overflowing Sheikh Radwan Lagoon. Al Haddad, an aid worker in central Gaza, sent BBC Arabic a video from a makeshift camp where sewage had built up into a pond next to displaced people. She described the smell as overpowering and unendurable. Unendurable. But they have to endure it. You get to cover your mouth and walk away. Polio is just one part of the health crisis facing Gaza. Earlier this month, the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees, UNRWA, reported 40,000 cases of hepatitis A, which can also be transmitted through ingestion of contaminated water in Gaza since the start of the war, compared to only 85 in the same period beforehand. Public health experts are also warning of a potential cholera epidemic. Aid agencies say doctors in Gaza are also struggling to treat a huge caseload of dysentery, pneumonia, and severe skin diseases because of the collapse of the health sector. The reason behind the spread of these bacterial diseases is the complete lack of a sanitation system, pediatric consultant Dr. Ahmed Al-Farah explained. He said the problems include the mixing of clean groundwater and sewage, the severe overpopulation, the extreme heat, the lack of ventilation, the overpopulated tents, and the oversharing of toilets. The UN estimated the vast majority of Gaza's 2.3 million people have been internally displaced since last autumn. Many people are living in shelters with just one toilet for 600 people, a World Health Organization official told reporters in July. The Israeli military operation in Gaza has killed more than 40,200 Palestinians, according to the health ministry. More like 200,000 direct and indirect deaths caused by the IDF. Yeah, that's numbers I believe more. 200,000, I believe that way.
That was from the
more.
Lancet.
I believe 200,000 more than I believe 40,000, because then it's been 40,000.
You're not just talking about the ones who blew up. You're talking about the ones that died later from amputation. You're talking about the ones that died later from disease, from hunger, shrapnel, whatever.
Pregnancy.
You're talking about every casualty. Casualty is not just death; it's also injury. So it's 200,000. It's more than that.
Yeah, but those are believable numbers. Like, it's been 40,000 for months. You can't tell me you haven't killed somebody in months. You keep saying 40,000.
I've seen 40,000 for a month, 2 months now.
While you're blowing the other half of everything else up and blowing up daycares and schools because, there was IDF in those twins blankets. I just know it.
They just found weapons like a blown up cradle. You put the weapons there.
You know why they blew up the twins?
Obviously.
You know why I think they blew up the twins? Because it was posted as a happy thing on fucking social media.
Yeah, and
And
they
I
don't
think
want
they
the
saw it.
Palestinians to have any kind of hope or joy.
I think they saw it. And I think they intentionally fucking did it. Regardless of, oh, those aren't the actions of the IDF, and we will do an internal investigation. We'll find ourselves completely clean of any kind of threat, and blah, 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 blah. This is from NBC News. Video reveals devastation and grief after Gaza camp shelled. Yeah, but still 40,000 people.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Like, these numbers, they don't feel right.
The numbers never go up on their official accounts because they don't have anyone to count.
NBC News crew captures moments. 8-year-old Abdullah Samor is rushed to the hospital as Palestinians race frantically to save victims of bombing.
Gruesome images of a young Palestinian boy with part of his head blown off and what witnesses described as an Israeli tank strike last week have shocked even hardened observers of the war in Gaza. Videos and photos showing a grief-stricken man holding up a boy, the flesh of his face hanging loose to reveal what appeared to be a hollowed-out cranium, began to spread on social media. NBC News crew in Gaza captured the moments of the body of the boy. 8-year-old Abdullah Samor was carried into Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis after the shelling. The violence unfolded in the area of nearby Bani Suhailia on Wednesday afternoon. Witnesses who said they survived the strike in Gaza, Civil Defense Agency said. Witnesses who survived the strike in Gaza Civil Defense Agency said. Ahmed Harb Ahmed Samar, the man pictured carrying the child, said he was a relative of the devastated family and identified the young boy to NBC News. At least 9 people, including 5 children, 2 women, and 2 men, were killed in the incident, the civil defense told NBC News.
Which one was Hamas? Which one? Which fucking one?
But yeah. The Israel Defense Forces said it could not comment on the... Okay, I'm so tired of reading this every week. The Israeli Defense Forces said it could not comment on the specific incident without exact coordinates for the strike, which NBC News was unable to determine in the devastated tent camp. But it said its troops were operating to dismantle Hamas military capabilities after Hamas' 7th terror attack, in which some 1,200 people, including hundreds of soldiers, were killed. Around 250 others were taken hostage, according to Israeli officials. You're still going on about October 7. And 90% of all the casualties has been on the Palestinian side ever since then. It's almost been a year.
I'm talking about IDF. IDF will... No, when people come back from Hamas, they're clean and they're fed, and they talk about how good they've been treated. People don't come back from IDF.
And they do. They're fucking scarred and they don't have a leg or they can't walk right.
Or they're probably going to commit suicide.
Yeah. They're so fucking...
Because there's no way you can live with the things you've done, the things you've seen.
Tortured. Yeah. People get tortured.
And people commit suicide, or they turn into what? Terrorist groups to thwart your actions. It's almost like you're creating your own fucking enemy.
On Wednesday, the IDF said in a statement that its troops were operating in the area of Khan Yunis, the center of which is less than 1.5 miles from Bani Suhailia. The IDF has not said exactly where its forces were when the tent encampment was hit. Video captured by NBC News crew on the ground of the aftermath of the incident showed frantic scenes outside Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis, with Palestinians racing to get victims into the medical facility. Several bodies wrapped in blankets are lifted off the backs of multiple trucks and carried into the hospital, while children with serious injuries are also rushed into the hospital. One boy is pushed on a stretcher as blood pools around his head, while another can be seen with a severe wound below his chin. Later, Abdullah is laid down on a steel table, his head, arms, torso, and feet splattered with blood. Pink bulbous tissue the size of a small fist sticks out of his left side, and flies circle his body. The child's arms are flung up above a mangled but recognizable face.
Did you see the pictures?
No. NBC News, I probably will, though.
I don't want you to.
And I've seen worse. 5 witnesses of Wednesday's strikes told NBC News that Israeli tanks had shelled the Palestinian encampment. Some also said missiles fell in the area. Ahmad Samor, the relative who carried Abdullah into a Nasser hospital, told NBC News that his family had been eating lunch when he saw projectiles raining down. Children and youngsters, elderly, 60 and 50 years old, they were eating lunch with their children. Samor said, he said those killed had no ties to Hamas.
Do any of them have any ties to Hamas? Have you
They
actually
probably
killed?
should at this point. They should all have ties to Hamas at this point.
I fucking would.
I just want to know if a single person that they have killed has actively been Hamas.
A few. Some, yeah. They've taken out some Hamas.
What, like 5?
I don't know.
6?
They don't actually, they won't release their counts.
That's because
when
every
they
male
won't-
is a fucking threat.
They won't release their accurate counts for anything. They won't release their IDF losses. They won't confirm Hamas kills.
I honestly don't think
they just drop bombs and they fucking kill them, and
they count all the men as Hamas.
Yeah.
And they look at that like a success.
90% civilian death rate is what we're looking at. 90% civilian death rate.
Which is unacceptable.
Yeah.
I mean, anyone that was going to be waging war or attempting to take out a militant group, even stupid fucking Americans, know not to fucking do something with a 90% death rate.
Oh, we did with the drone war.
85%.
Yeah, something like that.
It was 85.
Okay. Did Israel eradicate Hamas? No, he said. They eradicated our children, our fathers, and our grandparents. He said that he and others had believed that they had been in a safe zone, but there isn't any safe zone so far in the entirety of Gaza. While health officials in Gaza do not make a distinction between fighters and civilians, Israeli officials also estimate that thousands of non-combatants have been killed during the offensive. Meanwhile, journalists and humanitarian organizations have documented the devastating toll the war has taken on civilians. At Nasser Hospital, NBC News camera captured a man wailing over a young boy lying motionless in a plastic body bag. The child's face is bloodied with one eye open. Others crowded around a row of body bags, some holding and kissing the faces of the dead. Several other witnesses also described how they had been sitting in their tents or eating lunch when the shelling began. I swear, we were sitting, we had lunch, we were sitting, and suddenly the jets were dropping projectiles, one woman said. We did not provide her name. They killed everyone.
People are just trying to go about their lives, still trying to just go about their lives. And they're just there, just having lunch. And now the whole building's coming down.
It's like a 9/11 every few days for them. It's
every day. Fuck.
Yeah, it's you can't imagine how horrible it is.
But they're rebuilding their sewage infrastructure, so everything's fine.
And then they're going to bomb it again.
Yeah.
Why would they rebuild it when they know they're going to bomb it again?
Maybe they're rebuilding it for their nice, coastal hotels and shit they plan to build. Trump Tower that they plan on.
It just makes you so
I bet
angry.
there is going to be a Trump Tower. I bet you anything.
It makes you so angry.
Waltzing out there on its own for people that don't know, because he looks so squeaky clean. But
I almost bought the bullshit, dude. I almost bought it. I still want to buy it, and I just can't. I can't.
But I don't think that he's a bad person. I think he's a good person who's made some choices that maybe weren't fully educated to him.
I think at best what you can say is he tried to play the game when he first got in office, and what you have to do to get ahead in democratic politics is you have to have an AIPAC guy, and you have to support Israel to be, or otherwise you're going to be primaried by AIPAC. So if you look at it that way, then maybe somehow you can see how like he's still trying to do some kind of good.
You think AOC got an AIPAC guy? That's what happened to her.
I don't know what happened to AOC, but I haven't been happy with AOC for a long time.
I know. That's why this is kind of along the same lines, right?
Yeah.
Like getting into biting off more than you can chew, I guess, essentially.
Well, to get to this position where he's at, he's had to do things he didn't want to do, or he did want to do them, or he did want to do. I don't know. We don't know yet. I
wanted to believe that somebody who's said as many good things as he has said is a good person. But I mean, like I said before, everyone's got something bad that they've done. I mean, you can pull up dirt on everyone and anyone. It doesn't matter who they are. I'm pretty sure you can pull up. You can literally pull up bad stuff on freaking what's her name, the preacher lady who was like, "Let God heal you. Don't go to the hospital." And she's like, "Oh no, I'm dying. I need to go to the hospital." That lady. What's her name?
I don't know.
The old nun that everybody talks about.
Teresa?
Mother Teresa. Even Mother Teresa is not as squeaky clean as she was made out to be.
Neither was Gandhi.
Neither was Gandhi. So nobody's going to be 100% and perfect all the time. Everyone's going to fuck up somehow. We have mistakes we've made in our pasts and stuff. So just as lonely, low bottom feeders that we are, if we had more money and stuff and the temptation of money, we might make wrong choices as well. I mean, I thought you said that was the last Gaza story.
It was.
This is still about Gaza.
No, it's about Israel.
Which, if you mention Israel,
actually, it has stuff about Gaza in here. Actually, so, yeah.
Which is fine. It's so depressing. It's hard to read because it's so depressing. That's the only thing. Like every time I read it, I can't believe the things I'm reading are things that are happening this day and age. Like these feel like things that would have happened in World War II. That we're reporting on World War II incidents. That's what it feels like, not 2020 24, and it's hard to read that these things are fucking happening, and we're letting it. We're not just letting it, we're funding it and supporting it, and I hate it. We're forced to support a genocide. I've been working all this time to support a genocide.
Yeah.
So why work? I don't want to support it.
General strike.
I don't want to be a part of it.
General strike.
This is from Mondowise. Strong record of supporting the U.S.-Israel relationship. A look at Tim Walz votes on Palestine as a member of Congress.
A review of Tim Walz's time in Congress from 2007 to 2018 shows he supported multiple Israeli wars on Gaza, rejected the international consensus on the illegality of West Bank settlements, and opposed any unilateral declaration of a Palestinian state. When Kamala Harris selected Minnesota Governor Tim Walz over Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro as her vice presidential running mate, many viewed it as a win for pro-Palestine constituents of the Democratic Party. Shapiro's long history of pro-Israel positions and questionable ties to Israel, as well as his publicly inflammatory statements against Palestinians and their supporters, appeared to be key reasons Harris passed him over, but can Tim Walz be viewed as much better?
Absolutely.
A review of Walz's career shows that he can be fairly characterized as a reliable pro-Israel Democrat who has consistently voted for and taken positions in support of Israel. In fact, it is this very history that has led Israel lobby groups within the Democratic Party to celebrate Harris's choice, which should give us all pause. While Walz's time as Minnesota governor has received much attention, it was announced he would become Harris's running mate. It is actually his time in Congress that might shed the most light on how we will look to influence foreign policy from the executive branch. The record shows that during his career as a member of the House of Representatives between 2007 and 2018, Walz consistently voted in favor of pro-Israeli positions. In these years, he supported every Israeli war on Gaza, rejected the international consensus on the illegality of settlements in the West Bank, and opposed any unilateral declaration of a Palestinian state, preferring instead to pay lip service to a negotiated peace while Israel continued colonizing the West Bank unimpeded. In fact, it is Walz's support for previous assaults on Gaza that are among his most alarming votes. On January 9, 2009, Walz voted yes on blatantly biased Resolution 34, which essentially endorsed the pro-Israeli position on Operation Cast Lead, the Israeli assault on Gaza between December 27th and 2008 and January 18th, 2009. Resolution 34 called on nations to condemn Hamas for deliberately embedding its fighters, leaders, and weapons in private homes, schools, mosques, hospitals, and otherwise using Palestinian civilians as human shields while simultaneously targeting Israeli civilians. It is also sought to lay blame both for the breaking of the calm and for the subsequent civilian casualties in Gaza, precisely where the blame belongs, that is, on Hamas.
So he voted yes.
Yeah.
I can't even go further.
According to the UN, a total of 1,419 Palestinians were killed in the Israeli occupation forces attacks, of whom 82% were civilians. 5,300 people were injured, and around 5,300 houses were completely or partially destroyed, where only 3 Israeli civilians were killed. Furthermore, according to the report of the United Nations Fact-Finding Mission on the Gaza conflict, also known as the Goldstone Report, the mission found no evidence that Palestinian combatants mingled with the civilian population with the intention of shielding themselves from attack. The mission is unable to make any determination on the general allegation that Palestinian armed groups used mosques for military purposes. The mission did not find any evidence to support the allegations that hospital facilities were used by the Gaza authorities or by Palestinian armed groups to shield military activities. The mission found no indication that the civilian population was forced by Hamas or Palestinian armed groups to remain in areas under attack from the Israeli armed forces. The report did find, however, that Israel used Palestinians as human shields in up to 4 instances in contravention of international humanitarian law. The Goldstone report also found that some of the actions of the government of Israel might justify a competent court finding that crimes against humanity have been committed. And so, perhaps not surprisingly, the U.S. Congress also went after the Goldstone report itself. Resolution 867 claims that the report is biased and unworthy of further consideration or legitimacy. Resolution 867 further calls on the President and Secretary of State to oppose any endorsement of the report in a multilateral multilateral fora, including through leading oppositions to any UN General Assembly resolution, and through vetoing any UN Security Council resolution that endorses the report's contents. Walz saw fit to vote yes to this resolution on November 3, 2009, again in line with the position of the Israeli government. On November 16, 2012, Resolution 813 was passed by a vote in the House. Since the vote was without objection, no record of individual votes were made, but the implication is that Walz supported the resolution. Resolution 813 expresses unwavering commitment to the security of Israel as a Jewish and democratic state with secure borders and supports its inherent right to act in self-defense to protect its citizens against acts of terrorism, and was passed as Israel was assaulting Gaza as part of the Operation Pillar of Defense. According to the UN, during the operation, IOF killed 171 Palestinians, 60% civilians, including 35 children, 14 women. 650 were wounded, and 280 houses were completely or partially destroyed. In contrast, 4 Israeli civilians were killed. On July 11, 2014, Resolution 657 was passed by a vote in the House. Since the vote was without objection, no record of individual votes was made, but the implication is that Walz supported the resolution. Resolution 657 reaffirms the support of the House of Representatives for Israel's right to defend its citizens and ensure Israel's survival, and condemns the unprovoked rocket attack at Israel and calls on Hamas to cease all rocket attacks and other attacks against Israel, and was passed as Israel was engaged in the most destructive of all its wars against Gaza up to that date. As part of the Operation Protective Edge, which lasted between July 8th and August 26th, according to the UN report, Israel killed 2,251 Palestinians, including 1,400 civilians, of whom 300 women and 550 children died. 11,200 Palestinians, including 3,540 women and 3,500 children, were also injured, of whom 10% suffered permanent disability as a result. In contrast, 6 civilians were killed in Israel. In addition, 18,000 housing units were destroyed in whole or in part. Much of the electricity network and of the water and sanitation infrastructure was incapacitated, and 73 medical facilities and many ambulances were damaged. Many Palestinians were uprooted from their homes or temporary shelters multiple times at the height of the hostilities. The number of internally displaced persons reached 500,000, or 28% of the population. In 2009, Walz visited Israel and the occupied West Bank on a Middle East tour, where he met with Benjamin Netanyahu and told the Israelis he believes the growing number of Jewish settlements in the West Bank were hampering the prospects for peace. However, in March 2010, when tension between the Obama administration and the Netanyahu government was bubbling to the surface over the construction of settlements in East Jerusalem, Walz chose to attend and speak at the annual AIPAC conference, where he stated that Israel is our truest and closest ally in the region, with a commitment to values of personal freedoms and liberties, surrounded by a pretty tough neighborhood. Furthermore, his 2009 statement on settlements is at odds with his voting record on the issue. Indeed, Walz voted yes to Resolution 11 on January 5, 2017, which opposes United Nations Security Council Resolution 2334 that passed on December 23, 2006 by a vote of 14-0, with the United States abstaining, and that describes the UN resolution as an obstacle to Israeli-Palestinian peace. UNSC 2334 reaffirmed that the establishment by Israel of settlements in the Palestinian territory occupied since 1967, including East Jerusalem, has no legal validity and constitutes a flagrant violation under international law and a major obstacle to the achievement of the two-state solution and a just, lasting, and comprehensive peace. However, it uses weaker language on Israeli settlements than prior resolutions, and could potentially allow Israel to retain already existing settlements beyond the 1967 lines through negotiations. Still, this was one of the rare instances where the Obama administration deviated from Israeli policy by not vetoing the resolution, and Walz still saw it fit to oppose his own Democratic administration on this issue. This brings us to the current day, where in his role as Minnesota governor, Walz has paid some lip service to Palestinian concerns, but maintained his staunch support for Israel and opposed legislative action to hold it accountable even during a genocide. Walz has made some encouraging remarks after the Minnesota Democratic primaries in March of this year about the voters in the uncommitted movement, 19% of Minnesota's Democratic electorate, signaling to Democratic leadership that they should not take their votes for granted in light of the Biden administration's support for Israel's genocide in Gaza. Speaking to CNN, Walz said that they were engaged and that we're really proud of Minnesota's civic responsibility. We have some of the highest voter turnouts. These are voters that are deeply concerned, as we all are. The situation in Gaza is intolerable. The day after, in an interview, Waltz told NPR News host Kathy Werzer that he certainly calls for a ceasefire in Gaza. It has to be a working ceasefire. I've asked for these humanitarian pauses to get folks out. I want this thing to end. I don't want a ceasefire to last for a week or something like that. We need a permanent solution. However, it is unlikely that these words of sympathy will actually translate to tangible actions that put pressure on the Netanyahu government to end their genocide in Gaza. Indeed, Waltz hasn't called for an arms embargo or sanctions on Israel. And Harris's national security advisor, Phil Gordon, recently clarified that Harris does not support an arms embargo or taken any other meaningful policy positions that would potentially result in the end to Israel's mass slaughter. In November of last year, as the Gaza genocide was unfolding, he faced protests by pro-Palestinian activists who urged the Waltz administration to stop investing state employee retirement funds in the Israeli government and defense contractors who supply arms to that nation. In February of this year, protesters called on the state to cut financial ties with Israel ahead of Thursday's State Board of Investment meeting, where dozens of Minnesotans spoke in favor of divestment from accounts that benefit Israel. According to Waltz's office, $116 million is invested in support of Israel, although per pro-Palestinian activists, investments total over $3 billion, including indirect investments and entitles that profit from Israel, such as weapons manufacturing companies like Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman. There is a precedent for the State Board of Investors to divest from companies and funds that support violations of international law, as the board moved on its own to divest from South Africa in the 1980s in response to apartheid.
Oh, you could do it in the fucking 80s. You can't do it in 2024. It's 2024.
Furthermore, Waltz signed legislation directing the board to divest from Russia as punishment for the invasion of Ukraine.
Are you serious? Sorry.
No, that's hypocritical. Although state legislation prevents Minnesota from engaging in discrimination against Israel per the state's anti-BDS law. Still, as of today, Waltz has given no indication that he intends to support divestment of companies or funds that directly or indirectly support Israel's violation of human rights in Gaza and the West Bank, and recently canceled a meeting with Minnesota activists that took 10 months to schedule after they explained that they weren't just going to share their stories, but also press for policy changes. According to a staff person for Waltz, the governor was not prepared to talk about divestment.
Can I ask how divesting funds from Israel is against the BDS law, but if you divest from an African American continent
Or
country, how is that not?
It's because the anti-BDS is basically you can't boycott, divestment, or sanction Israel. It's against the law. So you can't divest from Israel in Minnesota. It's against the law.
That
Anti-BDS laws are against free speech, and they're unconstitutional.
so it's against the law to not fund a terrorist organization. That's what I'm hearing.
In early March of this year, in an interview with CNN, Waltz said that he supports a lasting two-state solution, although he didn't provide any details as to what that entailed. His voting record suggests the typical support for a negotiated peace where Israel holds all the cards in opposition to unilateral declaration of Palestinian statehood. Indeed, on July 7, 2011, Waltz voted yes to Resolution 268, which opposes any attempt to establish or seek recognition of a Palestinian state outside of an agreement negotiated between Israel and the Palestinians. It is unclear how a peace process that has been ongoing for over 30 years and has led to the immiseration of the Palestinian people will bring about a viable Palestinian state, especially in light of the recent decision by the Israeli Knesset to reject Palestinian statehood in a vote of 68 in favor and just 9 against. Coupled with his previously discussed position on settlements, Waltz's position aligns with the mainstream of the Democratic Party, which pays lip service to a viable Palestinian state as part of a negotiated two-state settlement, while exerting no tangible pressure on Israel to adhere to international law as it continues to colonize the West Bank unimpeded. It's no surprise then that Mark Mellman, president of Democratic Majority for Israel, praised Waltz's selection and said that he was a proud pro-Israel Democrat with a strong record of supporting the U.S.-Israel relationship, while the pro-Israel lobby, J Street, who had previously endorsed him, said that we know the Harris-Waltz team will stand up for our shared values, protect our community, and pursue smart pro-Israel, pro-peace leadership abroad. We're all in. This is from Mondo Weiss. Message from the DNC. The Democrats do not care about Palestinians. The Democratic National Convention did not go well for supporters of Palestinian rights, where Democrats were largely successful in burying their deep complicity in the Gaza genocide.
The Democratic National Convention did not go well for supporters of Palestinian rights. The one positive to emerge from the DNC was that the first panel ever officially sanctioned by the DNC on the subject of Palestinian rights marked a major step forward politically and was the result of a powerful grassroots movement to get Palestine mentioned in some official capacity at the convention. But aside from that small but still significant victory, the Democrats were largely successful in burying their deep complicity in the genocide in Gaza. Protesters outside clashed occasionally with police, and some protesters inside the convention and some associated events caused brief disruptions. But little attention was paid to Gaza on the whole, either from the stage or in the media. That doesn't mean the political situation remained stagnant, however. Even while Israel was continuing its merciless slaughter, targeting schools and other places of refuge, unfortunately, the politics have taken an even grimmer turn, leaving little hope that the killing will end anytime soon. Taken together, the recent developments are a recipe for a genocide that will continue for months and ongoing regional escalation. Despite the false optimism peddled by Joe Biden and his flunkies, the latest round of ceasefire talks, though ongoing, have already failed. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken collaborated with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to essentially destroy any chance of ceasefire in the near term. Blinken announced that he termed bridging proposals to fill the gaps between Hamas and Israel based on the ceasefire proposal Biden presented at the end of May. It's August.
Yeah, it's actually almost September.
Yeah, I was trying to give a little leeway. Blinken did not address the questions. Can I just call him Blinken? He seems shitty.
If you want to, I guess.
Okay. Blinken did not address the question of why such proposals were necessary when Biden claimed that the plan he presented back when he was actually an Israeli one. Hang on. Wait, what? Hang on. What? Blinken did not address the question of why such proposals were necessary when Biden claimed that the plan he presented back then was actually an Israeli one, and that after that falsehood became too threadbare, repeatedly claimed that Israel had accepted it. Oh, that was the made-up.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, I remember that.
They wouldn't accept their own peace deal?
Yeah, I remember that. And then I remember us pretending like there was a peace deal when there wasn't, and then Netanyahu being like, well, I don't know what he's talking about.
Yeah, and Netanyahu sabotaged it.
Yeah, like he does every other time. If we're not. Hamas, in fact, had long since stated it would accept the Biden proposal, as endorsed by the United Nations Security Council. Clearly, this was an unexpected turn for Netanyahu, who quickly set about creating new conditions that Hamas could possibly accept. On Thursday,
he's not a partner for peace.
Those ones that they couldn't accept were things like, we could keep bombing you, but you have to release the civilians that you took, and we don't have to give you anyone back because they're all dead anyway, mostly. That's what his new deal. Of course, you can't accept the continuation. It was just to stop bombing, right? It was just to stop bombing while they exchanged prisoners. That's all. How are you supposed to exchange prisoners when they're actively killing you? On Thursday, an Israeli official told the Times of Israel that Blinken's bridging proposals met Israeli security demands, which include continuing the genocide after a brief pause until Israel reaches all of its war aims, and a continued Israeli presence along Gaza's border with Egypt, the so-called Philadelphia Corridor?
Yeah.
Philadelphia Corridor. That's a weird name for that, right?
I don't know.
Philadelphia. Oh. It sounds like we made that name. One hardly needs a degree in international affairs to recognize that these are not bridging proposals, but are conditions that Hamas couldn't possibly accept. Neither should it should be noted, would anyone else, whether a government or a militant group. Yeah, I literally just said that. Like, how do you exchange prisoners when they won't stop killing you? Indeed, these conditions have even quietly undermined the U.S., Qatar, and Egypt by directly challenging Egypt's stance, backed by 2 treaties, that Israel may not remain on the southern border. While neither country has loudly objected to the proposal, neither have they backed it. And Egypt has made it clear they will not accept it. The idea that Israel would remain in the Philadelphia Corridor, again, sounds very American. In the Philadelphia Corridor is an explicit violation of the 2005 agreement governing that strip of land, which forbids Israeli deployment there. Israel has called for scrapping that agreement entirely and revising the 1979 peace treaty between Egypt and Israel. Egypt has categorically refused these requests and warned that continued attempts to implement them could endanger the treaty entirely. Basically, Egypt's like, keep us the fuck out of it. With the latest failure of ceasefire talks, the threat of an attack on Israel from Iran, Hezbollah, Ansar Allah, and the rest of the axis of resistance rises again. Do it. But with the passage of time since the assassination of Hamas's lead negotiator, Ismail Haniyeh, in Tehran, has given the United States the time it needed to redeploy forces to bolster its naval and air force defenses of Israel. This has the potential to render an attack on Israel, which remains highly likely, largely symbolic, like the one in April. But should the Axis decide that is insignificant, it also increases the risks that a more significant attack could spark a regional conflagration that the U.S. could also be drawn into. As in, we're already... I hate us. We didn't even get to pick Kamala. Can we just throw that out there? She was just automatically thrown in the fucking ring. Nobody even got to vote on her.
No. She didn't even get a delegate.
Nope. We didn't even take the time because we already fucking knew.
She didn't have a delegate in the 2020 primary.
Seriously? Then too?
She dropped out.
Oh yeah, that's right.
So she could be VP and do nothing and then promise that she's going to actually do something if she's president.
The refusal by the Democrats and by Kamala Harris and Kamala Harris's campaign to have a Palestinian American speaker address the DNC was just the latest misstep by a party that, even when it recognizes its need for progressive Muslim, Arab, and Palestinian voters, cannot bring itself to confront its own devaluation of Palestinian lives, especially in Gaza. This wasn't complicated. The uncommitted movement and other Palestinians and Palestine advocates in the party just wanted someone to speak to the audience about the suffering in Gaza and the need for a ceasefire. It could easily have been a moderate voice, one which aimed at the hearts of the audience, crafting a speech planned for an end to Israel's slaughter that even the pro-Israel ring of the party couldn't have overtly attacked. They did plan that. They let them write the whole speech. The whole speech that the Palestinian person
turned in
did.
the speeches and they still didn't. Yeah.
It had to be pre-approved and they had to endorse Waltz and Harris at the end, and they fucking agreed to it. If you pre-approved, you can obviously cut their mics at any point in time. If somebody was saying something wrong, they could have cut their mic. And they were going to endorse them. It would have been the easiest virtue signal that even Pelosi would have fucking done it. All right. And she's the queen of virtue signaling. Remember how she got on a knee and then didn't do anything else for policy? Yeah, she cared so much about Ford. Instead, they froze Palestinians out while giving the space to the parents of an Israeli-American hostage, who, while both citing the conflict, quite understandable given the situation of their son, and very clearly focusing on the Israeli hostages, showed more empathy for Palestinians in Gaza in their speech than just about anyone else at the convention. That's a shameful comment on the Democrats, on the Kamala Harris-Tim Walz ticket, and on the party as a whole, including many of its so-called progressive members. The decision to silence Palestinian voices while centering the awful suffering of an American Jewish hostage and his family sends a strong message to the Democratic base that the lives of Israeli Jews matter just as much as they should, while the lives of Palestinians matter not at all. There are no political necessities for this. AIPAC and donors might have been unhappy about a Palestinian speaker, but they wouldn't have just dumped Democrats because there was concern expressed for civilians in Gaza. And that wasn't the only concerning signal from Harris at the DNC. Haley Sofer, the CEO of the Jewish Democratic Council of America and Harris's former national security advisor, declared with confidence that Harris will never halt or condition military aid to Israel. She made the statement at an event sponsored by the American Jewish Committee on the sidelines of the DNC. Sofer is a significant figure in both the Democratic Party and the Jewish community, and she does not have a reputation for making policy statements without any basis in fact. Her proximity to Harris lends this statement a good deal of credibility, even though she was not specifically speaking on Harris's behalf, but merely giving her own estimation of Harris's views. She knows those views well since she helped shape them. Somewhat less credible, but still very concerning, was Illinois Representative Brad Schneider, who told the same audience that
Alon.
Alon Goldenberg, who was hired just last week by Harris, was her liaison to the U.S. Jewish community, told him that Harris will not try to re-enter the JCPOA, the Iran nuclear deal. Wasn't that, we'll give you money if you give us your nuclear arms?
Yeah. Your own money. We'll give you your money back to you if you don't.
Oh, their own money.
It's your own money.
We'll give you your own money if you give us your nuclear arms. That doesn't sound like a very good deal anyway.
I think, yeah.
That's a whole other thing. All right. I don't know that much in history because I fell asleep a lot in history. And I'm pretty sure they didn't teach
I didn't
us,
learn that
so-
in the textbooks.
I was going to say, I'm pretty sure they didn't. They would have, like everything else, whitewashed the shit out of this. Schneider is a somewhat less reliable source. He's more given to bombastic statements, misunderstandings, and poor judgment than Sofer. He also has a reputation here in Washington for not always thinking much before he speaks. Moreover, the statement itself is widely open to interpretation, both in terms of what Goldenberg might have meant. He may well have been merely trying to assuage fanatical pro-Israel concerns over his own stance on Iran, for example, and in terms of how Schneider himself is reading it. In other words, it's a bit concerning, but it's far from certain that this reflects Harris's actual thinking on policy. The trouble is, Harris isn't giving us any reason to hold out hope for a better Middle East policy than her current boss has. All the early signals are negative. The much touted empathetic tone that Harris has tried to adopt is not only wearing thin and fading as time goes on, but it also reflects little more than a greater ability than Joe Biden has shown to deceive the American public with sweet-sounding words that thinly veil a genocidal policy in Palestine, a militaristic approach to Iran and the border region, and pure indulgence of our criminal and brutal allies like Israel and Saudi Arabia. It is disappointing and dangerous that in the face of progressives, Palestinians, Muslims, Arabs, and a whole lot of anti-genocide Jews, and allies almost begging the Democrats to stop taking their votes for granted and just give them some reason to vote for Harris rather than just voting against Donald Trump. Kamala Harris is failing to even get over even that remarkably low bar. That's straight up.
This is from the BBC. Is HR ever really your friend? Employees often assume human resources are there to help, but given HR really works for the company, is it ever really on your side?
As employees, we often believe that HR exists to fix our problems, such as getting paid on time or managing workplace misconduct. We often expect them to advocate for us when we're in tricky situations. In many cases, staff have no one else to turn to when things go wrong at work. A trip to HR can feel like a safer option than bringing up an issue with a boss directly, and more proactive than complaining to trusted colleagues. At the same time, HR has an image problem. One study showed 70% of employees don't trust their personnel department. Dig a little deeper, and you'll find countless examples of employees who feel deeply wronged by HR. Some vent online, publicizing the failings of the department on social media and in blog posts. Others simply give up on HR and sue their employer. In 2020, the number of rulings on workplace litigation in the US hit a record high. If we think HR departments are failing employees, it may feel unwise to trust them with our most difficult workplace issues. If we think HR departments are failing employees, it may feel unwise to trust them with our most difficult workplace issues. In fact, problems can arise when there's often a disconnect between what we expect from HR and what HR is actually tasked with delivering. While employees may feel HR processes should right workplace wrongs, company leadership may think that the HR department is there to protect the organization. In this context, is it a misconception for employees to assume that HR is there to help them? A typical visit to an HR department might begin like this. A problem has emerged in a workplace, been left to fester, And when it reaches a point where someone can't stand it any longer, they turn to HR. Companies often tell new joiners that HR is there for them. And as a result, employees believe that if they turn to them, their problem will be heard and resolved. This is a misconception, says Tampa, Florida-based organizational psychologist Dr. Gina Cox. Employees think that the function of HR is to support employees. That contrasts significantly from what a leader of an organization would say, and it also contrasts significantly from the reality of how HR spends its time. There's no role within HR department. There is no role within HR departments as it is currently defined. That is 100% for the employee. The most obvious functions of an HR department are hiring, firing, and getting people paid. Beyond this, organizations have a choice about what the department can focus on. And successful departments, said David D'Souza of HR Advisory Board, the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development, or CIPD, London, the people's profession is there to help the organization achieve its ambitions through helping people excel within the organization. Fundamentally, this means supporting employee growth, making people feel positive and effective in their work, and building a sense of commitment to the organization. Yet Steve Brown, chief officer for a Cincinnati, Ohio-based restaurant chain with more than 1,000 staff, sees some HR departments focusing too heavily on legal aspects of the role. In other words, defending the company from getting sued. Many HR professionals are very literal, says Brown. They learn the rules, the laws, the regulations, and that's how they run HR. In these kinds of firms, directing unhappy employees to the HR department is less a means of resolving problems fairly and more a way of mitigating potential threats. This means that when disputes arise, HR departments often walk a line between delivering the outcome the employee wants and the outcome the organization wants. In departments where HR is focused on retaining staff, people who raise workplace issues may get a proactive and supportive response. Yet, if the balance of power is skewed towards management in the company, employees may stand little chance of getting the outcome they are seeking. Employees will lay bare details of experiences to an HR professional, only to be shocked to discover that at the end of it, they are in a losing battle, says Cox. Raising an issue could even rebound. The minute you walk into HR, you have to decide, is this a big enough issue that I'm willing to risk the possibility of retribution? More like retaliation. One key factor in defining how an HR department is run and what it can offer to employees is the relationship between HR and the leadership of the organization. The people profession has got a key role to play in helping ensure the organization's got a healthy culture, but it's almost impossible to do that in isolation, especially if you have a senior team that wants to operate in a diametrically opposed way. The attitudes of senior management in particular define the issues HR has the power to act on. Cox says, in good organizations, HR leaders report directly to the CEO rather than a head of operations. For example, in the best organizations, the work of the department is given parity with other traditionally influential departments, such as sales or engineering. Yet in many companies, this does not happen. The 2021 SAGE report revealed that 59% of company leaders said HR did not play a leading role in the organization, and 54% of HR leaders agreed that they were not taking a lead on defining company culture. That can mean, says Cox, that when it comes to deeply ingrained social issues like diversity and inclusion, HR in some organizations does not have the power it would need in order to even raise these. Other factors may also prevent HR from performing the role we expect of it. Line managers, for example, have a crucial role to play in managing people and addressing issues before they become serious enough to involve the HR team. But in reality, many fall short. Research shows half of employees feel they can't say what they want to their managers. I'm sure that's more than half, but probably half of people were too afraid to say that. Mm-hmm. Yet defaulting all issues to HR is a mistake, as it devalues what the department is there for. The people profession is a strategic function. It's about the culture of the organization. It's about how people are recruited into it and how people progress within it and how they're enabled to perform. And all too often, it gets drawn into small transactional areas. So what does this mean for employees with a difficult workplace issue? Cox suggests workers who foster good relationships with their managers build influence they can use to solve issues themselves when they arise, avoiding involving HR altogether. Solve your own issues. Work your way up in the company so you can have a say.
Pretty much.
All right.
Pretty much, if you try to talk to human resources, they're just going to rat you out, and you're going to be worse off.
This is from Indie Media Today. Jill Stein sounds great, but the system is still the problem. None of the above 2024. I know for sure we aren't voting our way out of this, which is why I'm firmly on team none of the above. Wait, am I really on team none of the above?
From me, India is.
Oh, okay. I thought you were saying this is me. I was like, wait, what? I don't think, wait, what? I had to ask you what my political beliefs were there for a second.
There is a lot of positive energy around the Jill Stein campaign from leftists and independents. She just named her running mate, a man nobody has heard of nationally named Butch Ware. She put out a very progressive policy position on what she would do for black people if elected.
Aggressive.
Aggressive.
You said progressive?
Did I say progressive?
You did. It says aggressive. I don't know if it necessarily matters because it kind of works either way. Because it would be a progressive.
She put out a very aggressive policy position on what she would do for black people if elected.
I'm going to aggressively support you.
She is by far the most popular candidate running who is firmly against Israel's genocide and occupation of the Palestinian people. What Stein would do policy-wise sounds great. Jill has the luxury to promise the world she'll never win and be held accountable to actually do any of it, even if her intentions are good. But in order for her to even have a chance, she would need the entire country to unplug from the duopoly horse race of corporate media. She would at least have to be mentioned by them as a contender, which she never is, because they don't want to even let people know she exists and is running. Sadly, corporate media still is where most of the country gets its political news and framing from. Definitely the portion of the public that votes. Stein has some of the more popular independent podcasters behind her too. Because the establishment duopoly has the money and the control of the narrative via a complicit media, it's virtually impossible for her or any unapproved outside challenger to gain enough traction nationally. Corporate media will control the narrative about her if they ever decided to cover her as a serious candidate. If corporate media ever started smearing her, many people would believe it, and it would even be worse than after 2016, when many Democrats blamed her for Hillary losing to Trump. Heaven forbid she actually had to compete with them at a national advertising level, buying ad time against them. The campaign has struggled to get on state ballots and is dealing with signature and procedural challenges from the Democrats in New York, where Greens will not be on the ballot. There are active suits still being heard in Georgia and Wisconsin. The Dems also tried to boot the Greens in Nevada, but were unsuccessful. The problem isn't replacing the president. The problem is the system itself. Between the corporate media's brainwashing of the public in partnership with the political duopoly, there is little outside forces can do to penetrate the shield of control in 2024 at the federal level. The voting process is also manipulated and sometimes rigged and controlled by the duopoly. I recently subscribed to a new Substack by Joey Sirkowitz, who in a piece titled A Wish List for the Future mentions the number 2 problem behind breaking up corporate media is the voting process and the machines. I am concerned that there is energy and hope being directed into an effort that will effectively disappear once the election is over, or substantially shrink at minimum. What is the plan once the election is over exactly? I feel like it's my responsibility, since so few are doing it, and I seem to be one of the few seeing it and saying something about it, to remind people that even if we got every ex-Bernie person on board, plus everyone to their left that doesn't get the Greens close to 5%, which only gets $20 million of federal funding, how much did AIPAC alone pledge to spend to defeat 8 House Democrats? Even $20 million is a drop in the bucket. 5% of the 150 million voters from 2020 would be 7.5 million votes. So how do you expand your tent to get more people? The Greens have historically gone after disaffected Democrats, and with the genocide that the party has been enabling happening for almost 11 months now, plus the anointment of an unelected cringe candidate that would never have emerged from a primary, there are plenty of Americans who have decided to never vote Democrat again. The net result of getting pissed off Democrats on board will dilute and water down the Greens by accepting pseudo-neoliberals that just don't like the Gaza policy, but were on board with everything else until then. If the Green Party were smart, they would focus on workers and organizing the rank and file against management and corporate-friendly political creatures like Teamsters and UAW leadership, and continue the work beyond Election Day. They could support and educate about worker co-ops and alternate structures to corporations to empower workers. That would actually expand their tent. If you feel like you have to vote for someone and decide to vote for Jill Stein, just know full well that it's not going to mean anything in the grand scheme. The next best thing The next best thing to none of the above in a rigged system is voting against the duopoly, so neither side of the uniparty gets your consent, at least. So voting isn't really a path to true power for workers in this system. Indy has that correct. Voting is not going to bring us away from fascism. You can't vote the fascism out.
People unfortunately do accidentally vote fascism in.
But not, yeah. So I think at this point, the only way we move forward is a sustained general strike to meet worker demands. A worker-led revolution that ultimately leads to proletariat control is the only way we will save people and the planet. For people like us, who are pretty close to being evicted, I mean, our kids are going to be hungry in a few hours, and we're not completely sure how to feed them, how we're going to feed them. Our car needs an oil change. We have no gas, and work has screwed us over. The state has screwed us. The doctors have screwed us. Insurance companies have screwed us. The hospitals have screwed us. I need some kind of hope. I need some kind of feeling like I'm doing something, or I'm not going to survive. So I'm going to vote for Jill Stein and Butch Ware in the November election, just for my own sanity, until that general strike comes or that revolution of workers comes.
I think you might be waiting for a long time for that one.
I
That's an unfortunate.
I believe there will be revolution in our lifetime. I just don't know.
Which way?
Don't know all the details yet.
Not sure what the revolution's going to be for, or who's going to be in control. I do want to say that I think that one of the big reasons that people like vote blue no matter who, or vote red until I'm dead, I think that those people don't believe or don't know that there can be another option, a third option, a fourth option, a fifth option. They
look at the duopoly as Pepsi or Coke. That's how involved they are. That's the level of involvement that they have.
That's ironic that both of those are red and blue. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I'm just saying, like, can we get some mellow yellow in here? Like some green?
Some Sprite?
Can we get some
Fanta?
What's the libertarian drink?
Dr. Pepper?
No. What would be the libertarian drink? Water? I don't know. And what if, like, there was a huge tent over all the left? If all the left consolidated to have any kind of power, could we see them, like, shift the Democratic Party closer to the center? Because they are basically Reaganites from the 90s. The Democrats are basically the Republican Party of the 90s, and Republicans are fascists. So if we had a couple other parties dragging them, more back to like their principles, like I don't see how that could be a bad thing. And yeah, we also need like ranked choice voting and other things. I don't even think voting really does that much, but it's something. It's what I'm allowed.
If my choices are to vote red or blue and I refuse, so I decide to not vote, it'd be better to vote against them than to just not vote. Finding a way to throw my vote somewhere else to show I disagree with you both so much. I would rather spend my time and my day coming into how miserable it is going to a voting booth in the first place to vote for someone completely not going to get it.
Yeah, but like, I don't know about you, but I always feel like I'm not doing enough. Like, I'm not doing enough. So if there's something I can do, and that's to vote for Jill Stein or Claudia de la Cruz, then I'm going to do it. And maybe that makes me less of a Marxist, I guess. Makes me less of a revolutionary.
Really?
I'll do anything. Just tell me what the fuck to do. I'll fucking do it.
You're trying to be a good person in a bad society. You're trying to find good in a system that's rigged against you in every possible way. Because neither the Democrats or the Republicans are going to help us or give us what we want or what we need. You know that.
Yeah.
They will help to some degree. The Democrats, hopefully, they will reverse Roe v. Wade, which is a major thing. It's a major thing that's been hurting a lot of women out there. So hopefully they will do like those little good. But that's the whole point, is to distract you. So you stop talking about Gaza, why they give you the things that they already gave to you and then fucking took away.
Yeah, like we already had the child tax credit.
We already had Roe v. Wade. How old is Roe v. Wade?
Yeah, give us something better.
We've already been to court. We've already told you guys you don't know how women's reproductive system works in the first place. You don't know how an abortion works. You guys don't even know from which. Look, I watched an interview with a senator who thought you could swallow a pill and that it would go to your vagina to diagnose what's wrong with a baby, like a colonoscopy.
Yeah, it's
Because things that go in your mouth go to your vagina.
Conservatives be dumb as fuck, okay?
They would go at your ass, guys. We're not shitting babies out. That's an old thing your mom used to tell you, that you pooped out babies, okay? If some of you are in 2024 and old-ass men in fucking Congress and you think that that's still how shit works, you should shut your mouth about what goes on in a woman. Actually, you should just shut your mouth about what goes on in a woman, because most of you have probably paid for more abortions than the people you accuse of getting them have gotten, all right? Let's just fucking put it out there.
Facts.
So we know
Yeah.
Trump's paid for abortions.
Because, like, even though abortions never stop, abortions don't stop. People, when they don't have options, they get abortions, whether the doctor gives it to them or not. And the wealthy women who need the abortions are going to the States and getting them, or they're getting them, their friend knows this person, they're getting it. But they're forcing the lower and middle class, they're forcing the birth rates to go up.
Jail time to doctors for helping save people's lives.
How do we get on this
Not how
topic?
that
We're talking about just time.
Because we're talking about the tiniest little bit of crumb of what the Democrats will do, which is to give us back the things that they themselves had taken away.
Well, they didn't take it away. The Supreme Court did. But
Yeah.
they didn't do anything for 50 years to codify that into law.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Legal and free.
Abortion should be legal and free.
Because people don't just get abortions because they don't want a baby. They don't just get abortions because financially they can't handle it. They don't just get abortions because they were raped. They don't just get abortion because mentally they can't handle it. Physically they can't handle it.
If you're really pro-baby, you'd not be starving all those children in Gaza. Wouldn't be allowing that shit.
If you'd be pro-baby, then you would do something about the adoption agencies, the adoption rate, the adoption process.
That's the only time they want to talk about this shit
It's
about
wild.
adoption is when they talk about abortion. So yeah, they don't. None of them actually adopt or anything. It's just
Well, yeah, I mean, because none of them also have uteruses, but they also decide what I get to do with mine.
But yeah, Kamala Harris sucks balls. I'm not going to vote for Trump.
They're going to
Tim Walz
order
is fucking
disappointing.
disappointing.
That's all I'm going to say about him right now. He's
I wanted to take the
disappointing.
bullshit, but I wanted to eat that bullshit up. But
He seems like a good family man.
yeah,
He seems like a good family man.
I didn't have a
and he
dad
has-
growing up, and
He seems like he has good localized family values, but he doesn't seem to have a value on families and human
he'd be a
life.
Republican candidate for president in 1988.
Did they like IDF or IDF?
IVF. They didn't have a problem with it. Republicans used to not fucking touch abortion. It was the Southern strategy started by Nixon that started this bullshit. It's like, we can't wait. We can't wait till 2028, 2032. People in Palestine, they can't wait that long. People in this country can't wait that long.
Well-
Like, I'm not an expert on how to break the duopoly. I'm
I
not.
don't think anyone is, or it would have been broken by now.
I'm just going to continue to shit on Democrats and Republicans. Like I said, Republicans, the thing I like about them is they stab you in the front. The Democrats stab you in the back.
Which honestly, I think I'd respect the Republican more.
At least they're honest.
Yeah, that's it. That's
That's the
why.
thing about conservatives, is that they're not, a lot of them. Okay,
It's 'cause
they're not
they're
all
from the
dumb.
South.
They're not all dumb, but like
Well.
they say what they mean, and if they don't like someone or something, they fucking say it, and they're upfront about it. But the Democrats, everyone else, even the left, they just fucking mask all their bullshit. That's why I don't fucking make fun of Republicans, because it's a low hanging fruit. If the jokes write themselves, there's no effort. You're not going to change their mind. A liberal at least has like some like self-reflecting capability.
To a degree.
Like, and even leftist has even more, because you're just more in tune with
Actually, too
humanity
much.
at that point, that you fucking hate everyone and yourself and
Too
the
much.
world, and you want things to be better. That's what a leftist is. The conservative is things, everything's great, don't change it or go back to what was good.
A leftist is over here like me in 2024 going, how the fuck are we at war?
And neolibs are like, nothing should change ever, and if we're going to change anything, it's going to be so incremental that only like 1,200 people will feel it. So like, our politics are just defunct, and
They've been.
it's hopeless. But like, I can't live without hope, and I don't think a lot of other people can either. So I'm gonna vote. So fucking sue me.
Hope's all you can have when you're in the lower and middle class. You hope for things to get better. You hope to get the raise. You hope to get a day off. You hope you can get your vacation days. All you do is hope when you're in lower and middle class. That's all you live off of is hope. 'Cause you don't have anything else.